we are talking about planning for a healthy business, and I would like to introduce Rich Balistrasi. He is our Vice President of Commercial Lending. Is that where we're at now? And so he's going to talk to you about business plans.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say is sort of a small group setting. If there are questions that you have or any topics you want to stop and pause and ask questions or, kind of probe further, just let us know. Mary is watching the chat, so we were happy to kind of pause and make this as custom as we can for you.
And you can just shout out too.
So this session is really all about planning for a healthy business. And I think given everything that we've seen in the last 2 and 3 years, is especially at the forefront of importance for companies to do. I mean, I don't think anybody would have really had any plans for preparing for a pandemic. But again, if you have a plan, it makes it so much easier to kind of pivot and respond as you kind of go through. So we'll jump into the slides here. If is there a...
The mouse is right there.
Oh, perfect.
You should be able to.
All right, so just quickly to kind of go over the agenda. So again, welcome to the session. And again, feel free to interrupt with any questions that you have. Just an introduction, Mary had mentioned Rich Balistrasi. I work in our commercial lending group. And again, this is something that we see at the forefront of any loan request that comes through. We always talk about, business plan, what's at the forefront for that business, what kinds of issues or concerns might be of importance to that company, and then figuring out what's the plan forward to help addressing any of those. For this session, we're going to go through the 4-step planning model. And again, I think a lot of times with a business plan is it looks very overwhelming from the start. You look at it, it looks like some big overwhelming task. And a lot of times people view it as something that is necessary or important to maybe go forward to get a loan or get some investors. But really, I think there's a lot of value you can pull out of deriving a business plan. And we're going to go through that. But the 4-step model is really just it's a good tool to kind of break down something into a little bit more manageable chunks. Again, to make it where it shouldn't be a burden to create, it should be something that's going to add value to you and your company. So again, kind of our learning objectives is, and this one's always, I think the key word in this one is this is an evolving planning process. I always say the business plan, it's great to get it started and done, but it's something that does need to be visited periodically. Go through, see if there's things that are changing. And most importantly, as I found, there's a lot of valuable lessons that you can take out of that business plan. What's working, what isn't working, what kind of changes and tweaks can you make? Just as sort of a different analogy, I just gotten back from a conference the other day. And as I was kind of on the plane, I was thinking a little bit about the presentation today, and I thought a lot of this is very much like if you're out piloting a plane, you've got a whole bunch of gauges and levers in front of you, and you're trying to operate the plane. And a business plan functions very similarly. If you think of yourself as the pilot, as the business owner, you're going to have levers and gauges that you're going to be monitoring, and you're going to be adjusting those levers as you go. And that's really what a business plan is all about. It's about adjusting those levers so that if you need to change up your marketing, if you need to change up your pricing or your customer segment, you can take a look at that and try to look at the numbers and the data that kind of drives into that. Also discussing how to convert a vague idea into a plan. So again, depending on what stage you're at, I mean, there are all different components and stages of that, and we'll walk through it. But again, how to kind of take something, and the whole point of this presentation is really how to take something at whatever stage you're at and kind of grow it into something that, again, is going to be tangible and beneficial. And also going through the importance of a healthy personal credit score and also healthy relationships with lenders. And I don't say that selfishly as a lender. I say that truly as, your banking partners, and whether it's your banking partner, your attorneys, your accountants, your real estate agents, your insurance agents. These are your kind of power team around you there to help you be successful. So again, having those relationships is really crucial because again, they're a great sounding board. We've all worked with a variety of different companies that have experienced different issues. So we can really kind of help guide you through those things if we have that kind of relationship and dialogue to be able to have that communication. And then also how a business plan helps motivate stakeholders. And as much as, you know, the owner is in control and driving the bus, there are a lot of different stakeholders. You may have investors there, you have your banker there. You know, there are a number of different stakeholders there, and that's also something that's important. And again, just from a communication tool and strategy planning standpoint. And then also the day-to-day action plan for running your kind of day-to-day routine operations. Again, it can get as big picture and as granular as needed, but again, the key is really to kind of fine-tune that over time. So for this example, I'm actually going to use Sophia. So Sophia is actually somebody that's got a great idea for a business, and we're going to walk through her stages kind of throughout and what she experiences. So Sophia, she's actually looking to start a cell phone repair business. So right now it's just an idea. She's got this, you know, she's done some research on it. She thinks it's something that the market is looking for, and it's something that fits in her wheel of expertise. So she's going to go through the 4-step planning model like we talked about, and she specifically targets a 2-year period. And again, kind of putting it, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but something that's going to be measurable. So in this case, 2-year time frame is something that she's really targeting. And as her business grows, her planning approach is going to change. You know, like I said before, there's always going to be different pivots and turns kind of throughout. And the key is really to make your plan as flexible as possible to give you the tools to be able to adapt. And so as we go through, you know, try to think this in mind of your business, or depending on what stage you're at, and how you can relate. And again, if there's any questions that we can kind of help make this specific to you as well, just let us know. So here's the 4-step model. So step 1 is always kind of the back of the napkin plan, go or no go. I always say this is when, you know, you're sitting at home or you're out at a restaurant and, you know, you say, this could be a great idea. I like where this could go. This is something that I think is important. I think it's something that I would be good at, or there's a need in the market for. Step 2 is the resource plan. So, hey, this is a great idea, but what do I need to do to take the next steps? What would it take to actually get this business up and going? Step 3 is the business plan. So how am I going to finance this business? You know, no matter what business you're looking to start up, there's always going to be some element of capital that's going to be required. And then the action plan is, how do I make this a healthy business? You know, it's great if you can kind of get to day 1 and get the doors open. It's a whole different ballgame when you start managing that day to day. You know, and you're kind of in the trenches, kind of working through problems as they come up. All right, so again, this is just sort of a sample timeline, but this is setting out Sophia's time frame here. So here we have business growth on one axis, and then time frame on the other one. So here we are, year 1. Sophia's looking at that back of the napkin approach. Step 2 is going to be the resource plan, and now she's starting, you know, trending from year 1 into year 2. Developing that business plan, improving her credit score, doing what she needs to do to be poised to operate. And then the other key down here too is, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on, but you know, you see Sophia on the bottom timeline. Sophia works at her day job full time. Eventually she switches to part-time, and then eventually she'd go full-time into the business. The key to that is really she's trying to plan out, well, how do you juggle opening and starting a business, creating enough cash flow for her to live off of, and still making it work. So for her, the solution was to kind of gradually shift her personal income from working full-time with an employer to being full-time into the business. And she laid out some timelines for that. And then again, the final step is the action plan, how you're going to manage that day-to-day operation. And that's when she'd start to work full-time for herself. So let's start a little bit with the back of the napkin approach. So I always say on this one, and I know I've done this personally, save those notes, because sometimes this is really the idea generation phase. Throw down different ideas, anything that kind of comes to mind, because it may not be something that you choose to implement on day 1. But once you're up and established, you may say, you know what, I think I'm ready to add a product line. Well, maybe there's something that you put on your napkin that, you know, maybe was appropriate. You can revisit it and say, you know what, that was a great idea back then. It just wasn't the right time. So save those notes, because again, they could be valuable kind of down the road, depending on what course your business takes. In Sophia's case, she jots down that she wants to fix smartphones, tablets, and appliances. And she makes a note maybe later. Because again, you make it too broad, it's a little bit hard to kind of build a business if you're kind of in too many spaces. So she says, appliances might be something that can come later. What is my credit score? Do I need a website? Who is my competition? Who can help me find these answers? And I think one of the most important questions is, am I ready for all of this? So again, this is really just the back of the napkin. Jot down the ideas, jot down any questions that you have, because again, sometimes when things start picking up, it's good to always have that as a reference tool to go back, because these are all important things that you're going to need to know before you really get started. So in step one, here are some of the key questions that typically come up. And I always say this is a crucial stage, because it's very important to know, I always say, the question is really, what is your why? Why is it important to you? What are you trying to get out of this business? If it's something, is the goal to get to a business size that can support you personally, working full-time in it? Is it something that you're satisfied with your personal income and your personal lifestyle? You're looking for something that's maybe a little bit more hobby driven? Is it, the new term that I always see kind of thrown around a little bit, is it a new side hustle for kind of a home-based business? What really is the objective here? Because that's going to really dictate it. If you say you want to start out small, it's something that you enjoy doing, and it's something that you want to do kind of in off hours or weekends. Next thing you know, it's turned into a $5 million company. Well, it might not be exactly what you really wanted at the end of the day. So again, kind of knowing what it is that you're looking for to get out of it is really kind of crucial to understand as you kind of navigate through this. What size business do I need to build to achieve those benefits? So again, a lot of that comes down to a number of different factors. One that we see most common is income level. How much money do I need to generate, not only to sustain the business, but my personal lifestyle. But then also, what's kind of the vision for the future of the business? Is it something that you picture staffing up and maintaining a large staff for? Is it something that you project being able to kind of have a bigger impact? Maybe it's an environmental type business that has some, type of social impact initiative. Figuring out exactly, what it is that you want to do, what size that's going to look like, what type of scale you're going to need to get there. And have I identified a real business opportunity which I can capitalize? I've seen a lot of times the business opportunities come about, may look like something that, looks like a great idea, sounds like a good marketing idea, but maybe the price point's going to be too high. People aren't going to actually buy. Figuring out, is this really something that, there's going to be a market for, that market's going to be able to bear the cost that it's going to, for either your services or product, and is it something that you can really capitalize on and grow to that size and scale that you really envision and project? And then the last thing is, what assets do I need to purchase, rent, or lease? Who will I need to hire? So again, it's one thing to have the product or service and know what it is and what it's going to look like. It's a whole other thing to know, well, what type of expertise do I need to get there, or what types of physical assets do I need to buy? Is this something I can do out of my home, or do I need to find a commercial space to rent or purchase? Again, trying to start to compile what's it going to take to get there. And again, it's step one, again, trying to jot down these questions, make sure it's something that you can understand and kind of start to formulate a list of, what types of things do you really need to understand well before you jump into starting the business. And moving on to step two with the resource plan. So back to Sophia, she's going through and she's kind of creating some estimates. And it's very important. So on the slide, we know that it's startup costs. Those are a little bit different than what you might see as sort of the resource plan that we started talking about in step one, where it's purchase of physical assets or what types of resources you need. Startup costs are going to be a little bit different. It's going to include that, but there's going to be a couple other things as well. So Sophia budgeted space, equipment, and supplies. So kind of the things that you might expect in there. So she budgeted $18,250. And again, part of this is going to come into play with, say supplies, for example. How many supplies do you need to start up? And it's a fine balance, because you don't want to put out too much cash at the beginning for supplies that you may not need for a while, but you've also got to be well stocked enough to be prepared to operate that company as well. Skill development, I always think this is one area a lot of businesses fall short on developing, and I say that for both employees that are being hired and also you as an owner. I think it's very important that you're kind of staying up on that, because you look at some businesses with maybe the evolution of technology, how rapid that can be in some segments. It could be something where maybe there's new processes that are, designed around a certain type of product development. Being able to keep up on these types of trends is really kind of crucial to the success, and most importantly, budgeting for that and making sure you've got the time and money to be able to continue that development. Staff, accountant, and bookkeeper, again, I can't say it enough. Rely on that. I call it the sphere of influence. Your professionals that are there with you, because they're going to be able to help you not only guide you in the right direction, but also kind of guide you down a path to avoid certain pitfalls that you may experience as well. Insurance and taxes, and she comes up with an estimated total of $21,000. So again, just to kind of come back to that with living expenses are not included in Sophia's resource plan, because she's looked at sort of transitioning from her W-2 wage employment job to being a full-time business owner. So for her, for now, that's what she's going to be living off of personally, but very important consideration you make anytime you start a business, because there's always going to be some type of ramp up period for a business, and you don't want to be you don't want to have that additional burden or stress of worrying about covering your own personal expenses and servicing your liabilities while you're trying to run the business at the same time. You want to give the business the best chance you can of getting it up off the ground. Okay, so Sophia's estimated startup costs, this is going to be more of the resource plan. She's got 21,000 that she came up with for her total number. She's decided she's going to come up with 7,000. That's what she's got for her equity into the business. So now she's looking for an additional 14,000. She's got to try to come up with to fund that difference. So we're going to go into a little bit about what are her options. And a few things that she's going to want to consider is really kind of going through. So number one is the ideal location. You think about Sophia's business model with cell phone repair. It's something more than likely it's going to be a retail location, probably going to be somewhere that you're going to want in a fairly high traffic area. It's going to want to have good visibility. Those are probably some of the key considerations she's probably talking through. Locating discounted equipment and supplies. Again, it may not be the type of thing that she needs to have the latest and greatest. So she's looking for some sort of discounted equipment to help save on some of that upfront cost. Pros and cons of buying in bulk. Too much inventory affects your cash flow. This one in particular is one of the biggest challenges startup companies have, and actually one of the biggest reasons a lot of startup companies ultimately end up failing in the first year is not managing that cash flow cycle well, which is different from your profitability. So in this case, you may be able to buy inventory at a discount because you're buying in bulk, but the order is going to be much larger, which then ties up more of your cash. If you tie up too much cash, that then makes it a little bit tougher to pay your rent, your payroll, your utilities, kind of your ongoing weekly or monthly obligations. So trying to find what's that right balance. It's really important at this stage to try to run those numbers and get those as accurate as you can. Fair wages and benefits for employees. Talking about especially the impact from COVID that's had over the last couple of years. We're seeing it now with wages and benefits for finding employees. It's crucial, and it's really we've seen that escalation. We've seen in wage increases coming through, and the challenge that poses. And again, just like in banking, your biggest asset's your people. It's the same is true for really any business. So again, figuring out what type of person you're going to need and what the real cost is going to be for that right fit for your business, again, is really essential at this stage. Budgeting for taxes, again, that's another big pitfall. That's one that I'd say heavily rely on your accountant for advice and input on. Because if you fail to budget for those are ones that are only going to build and get worse over time if you're not properly planning for those. Insurance, again, that's another one of those risk buckets where it's something that might be easy to forego in the beginning, but it could be really catastrophic for you if you pass on coverage that you really should be maintaining. And then also pay for services such as website design. You're going to have decisions to make where you can either pay more upfront or you can pay a higher monthly premium. A lot of times, especially at a startup phase, may make sense to pay more on a monthly basis. Again, just kind of working through that cash flow cycle. But if you've got the startup capital, you can certainly get some savings if you're able to pay more upfront for those services as well. And the important thing, it's not so much as important to figure out what's the right answer. It's more of what's the right answer for you in your particular circumstances. And again, kind of talking that through with those professionals around you. So again, moving on to step 3, this is where you start to kind of put pen to paper and draft that business plan. And I would say there are a number of different templates out there that you can use on the web. The Small Business Association has a number of different templates. SCORE is another great organization that has some resources. But the idea here is really just to do something that's going to fit for your plan, be true to kind of who you are, and convey the message as succinctly as you can. So this one, the first kind of point we have here is tell a story that makes your idea come alive. And I could say from my experience working as a lender, people come in all the time with different types of business ideas, whether it's product, service, and the hard part for me is really kind of looking at it and understanding what it is that you do and why it makes sense. And so kind of putting that into some type of story that's going to make somebody on the outside really understand what you do and why that's something that's important to the market and would ultimately be successful. Really kind of makes all the difference in helping us really understand when we sit back and evaluate, okay, is this something that we're going to be able to do a loan for? And same thing for an investor. They're going through the same type of experience. This is where it really convinces others to take a stake in you, because not only do we want to make sure that it's a good business idea, that there's a marketable product or service there, and that you've got your pricing strategy in line, and the projections are reasonable. Most importantly, we want to know that you've got the ability to execute on that plan. We always say execution is really the key to any plan, and even the worst plans. If you have excellent execution, that's what's really going to make all the difference there. You want to project at least 3 years into the future. The hard part is, again, that's going to be a moving target. So, we always say we want to try to look at the next 3 years, but you don't really have any crystal ball. So the idea here is really just to see, well, where do you see the business going? Do you see any rapid growth? Do you see any challenges or hurdles that are going to be coming up on the horizon? What's it going to take to kind of get you there? And again, part of that plan is to just figure out if things aren't going as to plan in year 1, then it's a chance to kind of sit back and reflect, well, how's that going to impact year 2 and 3 at that point? And you also want to clearly outline your business development plans in financial terms. So one of the biggest things I always say is look at those underlying assumptions that you have in terms of financial. So when you're creating your business plan, you're creating these financial forecasts, try to figure out, what are some of the assumptions that are being baked in there. If let's say it's a retail location, in Sophia's case, how much foot traffic do you need to see per day? How many people per day do you need to see to create the type of revenue you need? What does the average repair size need to be to create that revenue? And really kind of laying out those assumptions really helps the reader understand this is what's going to drive that. And I've seen a number of businesses that sound great in concept or theory, but when you get to the financial projections and you dig into, okay, well, what's driving the revenue number? Sometimes there's really not a lot behind it. It's sort of a guesstimate of what might be available. But again, trying to hone in on what those underlying assumptions are. And even in some cases, especially for out of market competitors, or industry trade shows. I mean, there's a number of different avenues you can kind of go, but there are some types of data that can kind of give you at least a way to benchmark some of it to understand, what would be a reasonable revenue target. And then, after that, looking at your expense structure and figuring out, are there ways that you can maybe be doing something cheaper than your competition? Have you allocated and budgeted for all of the costs that you might see? And again, these are the kinds of things that you want to kind of run through with your resource partners, ask for feedback, ask for different ideas. I can tell you whether it's your attorney, your accountant, your banker. We've seen enough companies that we can kind of have an idea, what might be missing or what might help give you a competitive advantage. Again, kind of talking that through and figuring out what's the right fit for you is really crucial at this stage, because you really want this to be your best, most accurate assessment of where you're going to go. But again, you need it to be fluid too. So for Sophia's business plan, she really looked to focus on raising her credit score. That was one area that she needed to focus on. Make sure that when it came time to apply for the loan, she was ready. So she used part of that time in year one to kind of work on saving some money for her equity injection and also focus on improving her score. Again, trying to get herself as well positioned as she can for when the time came. Sophia met with a banker several times to get feedback and advice. Again, having that ongoing dialogue. A lot of times, I find that some people have a misconception that when you go into the bank, it's sort of like going into Shark Tank and you're going to make your pitch and it's going to be yes or no. Where really, we in particular take a consultative approach. So we're going to sit there, we're going to look at a plan, and if for some reason there's something in the plan that is an issue, we're going to be honest with you and give you some feedback. Is there something that maybe you can tweak that might make it work? Or is there a different avenue we can kind of look at? Sophia also took a class on business plan writing. And again, there are a number of different agencies that you can kind of work with to kind of go through that. But again, really kind of making sure that you've got everything captured in that plan that you really need to. And maybe think of some new ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of before. Sophia shared her plan with family and friends. And again, this is always an important component of that too, because they're your support system. So, when things are rough or you're looking for help or assistance, having that support behind you is also a key component. And for Sophia, the process took a long time, but it paid off. In this instance, her family and friends ultimately decided, hey, this is a great plan. You've put in the work and we're going to fund your startup costs. So talking about that, sources for financial support. It's a very common question we get all the time is, you've got a great idea, a great plan. Well, where do you go to get that capital? There's always equity and cash that you can inject yourself and figure out where that can come from. But where do you get the rest from? Any type of funding gap that you're going to have in there, you got to look for other means to kind of supplement. So number one, angel investors, bootstrapping. So angel investors, just kind of go back for a second. Angel investors are these typically wealthy individuals who are out there. They're looking for startup companies that have a lot of growth potential in there, and they look to invest kind of early on in the process. They typically invest as an equity investor. So it's, again, something you got to consider. That's part of your plan is your business going to be structured in a way that you need to be 100% owner, or is it something that you're willing to kind of open up and bring in other partners? And then that generates other questions. If it's a partnership, who's going to manage the day-to-day? Who has key decision-making authority? Those are all key questions to ask that then kind of guide, well, where do you go for some of your funding sources? Bootstrapping is another method. This is one that's very common. And this really kind of goes back to the old term of kind of pulling up your bootstraps and really figuring out where are ways that you can kind of cut costs, save money, and kind of do this on a more frugal type plan to start up and get the initiative going. Crowdsourcing, that one's fairly new. With kind of some of the sites that are available online nowadays, it's opened up a whole other avenue of sources for investors to invest in your business. Friends and family members. So Sophia was the lucky recipient in this case to be able to find some friends and family to help her fund that cause for her business. And again, that's another very common avenue we see quite often as well. Incubators, that's another one we've seen, especially recently, has become a lot more popular. And it's, in particular, you see a lot of incubator space now being developed where, you know what, rent is a big expense for a business getting started up. Some of that overhead, utilities, those are all big line items when you're putting together your projections. So to the extent you can find incubator space to be able to kind of go and work, and kind of an added benefit is a lot of times networking with other entrepreneurs who are also getting started out. You know, that's another great way to get started. Local and state economic development organizations. There are a ton of resources out there and available, both not only from the business plan writing, but also from different types of assistance if you want to get into government contracting, if there are types of grants associated to helping your business get started, if there are certain economic incentives that certain cities or communities may have. Again, kind of reaching out and kind of figuring out, well, where are some of these things and who are the right people to talk to. And again, that's where kind of coming back to that sphere, you know, look to those people around you to kind of ask those questions because they can help guide you in the right direction to get access to some of those. Peer-to-peer lending, that's another one that's gotten more and more popular nowadays as well. And small business loans. So again, that's something that we do here at Chelsea. And it's something that we do. There's a number of different programs available. One in particular that helps, especially with new businesses getting started up, is with the SBA. They do a great job. They have a number of different programs available, in particular for businesses when they're really kind of getting started up. So again, kind of exploring what's going to be the right fit for you. You know, would you prefer to kind of come in with something in a debt structure? Would you kind of prefer to come in with something with an equity structure? You know, and again, they all have their pros and cons. It's about finding what's the right fit for both you and the company structure that you're trying to develop. And the last one, sorry, to also mention is venture capital as well. Depending on the size and scope, venture capital works somewhat similarly to angel investors as well, where it's, you know, they're really trying to invest in a company that's got really high growth potential to kind of get that up and going. A lot of times that also comes with some type of management structure or infrastructure as well. So one thing when you're thinking about your business plan is also thinking about how can you be strategic. So it's one thing to kind of formulate all this data, think about kind of all the ins and outs, what it's going to take to get your business started. But the key to this is really the plan needs to be strategic. So just as an example, so if you know, you're out on the water, I always like this example, being on the coast, it's always nice being out on the ocean. So if you're out in the ocean, you see the sailboat kind of going, you know, which way are you going to steer? So you got to plan for the future. Obviously, you know where the sailboat's going. You may predict that it's going to, you know, tack one way or another to try to navigate the winds. But you know generally which direction it's going to go and which way you're going to need to navigate towards. But the key is really to plan for the future, plan for change. And again, not to kind of harp on it, but the pandemic, we've certainly seen that is, you know, plan for change. I mean, we saw companies all across the board really had to pivot their business models as they kind of navigated the challenges in the last 2 years. Some businesses that I look at today are drastically different from what they were 2 years ago. Other ones operate actually very similarly. So again, figuring out, do you need to pivot? And if so, what areas can you pivot in? Learn from the past, including mistakes. Again, you know, I mean, there's really no perfect formula for operating a company. But again, going back to that business plan and kind of what I talked about, if you think about yourself as the pilot in the plane, knowing which levers to pull, you might not always pull the right lever, but just recognizing, you know what, maybe I didn't need to pull that lever quite as hard, or I could have scaled back a little bit. You know, recognizing that and then, you know, adjusting for it in your future forecasts and your business plan. This one's a big one, minimize risk. So it's something that's very interesting, kind of looking at how people approach risk. I mean, in general, entrepreneurs, you know, it's one thing I've always admired about them is, you know, they're willing to take the risk and open a business. You know, there's no guarantees of success when you start a company, but recognizing those risks You know, we always say in banking is, you know, there's always going to be some level of risk. It's figuring out what's the best way that you can mitigate it, and figuring out, is it an acceptable risk that you're willing to take on, and figuring out if it is a risk that you're willing to take on, what's kind of your plan, you know, B, C, and D if something happens with that particular risk. So again, identifying it and knowing it's there really makes the world a difference, because again, if you get hit with one of those risks out of left field, makes it much more difficult to respond. And an action plan really helps you stay strategic. So again, just figuring out what are those next steps going to be, how do you navigate and kind of stay the course when you need to. So now for step 4. So this one is one I've used this term kind of all throughout my career, setting SMART goals. So the key here is really to drive some of the data and analytics for you. You know, you're going to set certain targets throughout, but again, you want them to be SMART. And so actually, I'm going to skip to the next slide real quick here. So you've probably heard this term before, but specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So again, figuring out something that's going to be, you know, make each of your goals something that you can revisit periodically and use it as sort of a yardstick on your progress. You know, each goal that you want to do, you want to make it very specific. You know, so talk in terms of maybe number of customers that you need to see per day, or revenue threshold that you're trying to meet. Measurable, exactly what is that dollar amount, or what is that number of customers that you need. Make sure it's something that's attainable. Don't set something that's too hard, because, you know, you'll be discouraged if you don't need it. You know, you may generate unnecessary worry. Make sure it's relevant. So again, is it something that's actually important to you and your business? I mean, sometimes I see companies, they develop these large dashboards that have so much data on it, it's overwhelming, and it's hard to figure out, well, what's really important to helping me achieve my goals. Hone in on specifically those types of topics, and also making them time bound. So again, is it something that's important for you to achieve in a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year? You know, what does that time frame look like? Personally, I've always liked to refer back to setting things incrementally. So there are some things that I'm going to have set for short-term horizon goals. Other ones are going to be much more long-term based. So again, just to go back now. In Sophia's case, she went through and she said, I'm going to achieve a monthly customer count with 500 within 3 months. So again, that's a threshold item where she's saying, to achieve my revenue threshold, I think I'm going to need this many customers. What can she do to achieve that? So she's going to say, I'm going to advertise in the business journal, increase my social media outreach, identify effective marketing opportunities. And then what does success look like? So the goal is 500. So for her, she's setting that time frame. She's saying in month 1, she wants to see 400, 450 by month 2, 500 by month 3. And that might be very reasonable. She may see kind of the hype around a grand opening, you know, ramp up. She may see a lot of customers in month 1. Other businesses might be a little bit different. They might say it's going to be a little bit slower. I might, you know, it's going to take a little time to build some name recognition. For her time frame was September to achieve the 500 customer count. And then she says, well, what do I need for resources to do this? So in this case, she has marketing expense, the $300 for an ad. She's going to put out flyers, and then she's also going to do a website upgrade. Again, there's some additional costs in that, but again, budgeting for that and recognizing that upfront is essential. All right, so just to kind of sum things up, there is, in this I can't emphasize enough, there's more than one way to plan. So again, the templates that are out there online are great, and they're great places to start. Make sure it's something that's going to work for you personally and for your business, and be flexible with it. If there's something that's not applicable or doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. Don't get caught up in the details, because again, there's really no set way that it has to be. The important thing is that it's something that's functional and going to be useful to you. The planning process helps refine your ideas and prevent errors. So again, there's always going to be errors, and the key here is really just to hone in on, like I said, what those levers are in your business. You know, is it something that you need to play with the marketing lever and start marketing more? Is it a pricing issue that you're challenged with? Do you have different competition that's come into the market? Figuring out what those levers are and what's the right level to keep them at is really important, and that's what a business plan is going to help you do. The types of plans need to change as your business needs change. I think this is, you know, if you take one thing away from today, personally, I've always thought that that's the most important thing. You know, just because business is always gonna be an evolution. I always say, you know, I've never seen a business that's actually gone in and created a growth chart that was a straight line. It was always kind of up and down. There were peaks, there were valleys, you know, and that plan is going to change each time that you hit that peak or valley. Things will change, circumstances will change, and you just got to be flexible and know how to respond. But that plan is really kind of your grounding item. That's something to kind of go back to and say, okay, this is what I was doing. What is or isn't working now? And what do I need to change? Engage your stakeholders in the process. I can tell you as a banker, we love communication. We love hearing, you know, how you're doing, what challenges you're facing, figuring out, you know, where are you in the process? Because for us, that, you know, that really drives our ability to be able to help. And again, it's not just, you know, bankers, but again, your attorneys, your CPAs, your insurance agents, everybody's there to really kind of help you navigate that through. So engage them early, engage them often, you know, tell them how you're doing. And then even when you get the investments you need to plan strategically to ensure you got a healthy business. So again, figuring out, you know, what's it going to look like in the future for you. You know, in Sophia's case, she may be sitting there saying, I've got the tools to service those 500 customers, but, you know, I think I'm going to hit that pretty quickly and I'm going to need to invest in some type of automation, and that's going to require a bigger investment. Well, if she starts planning for that early on, it's going to help her reach that goal that much sooner, and it's going to be that much easier to transition. So again, kind of strategically thinking about where the business could go and what you need to do. Again, just to summarize some of the benefits and risks. Some of the benefits of the planning, you know where you are and know where you're going. Those are always important. And again, kind of looking at where you are in time. You know, the idea is pull that business plan out periodically. Don't write the business plan, you know, because you needed to get the loan, and once you get the loan, it goes back in a drawer. Pull it out periodically, read it, see what's working, what's not, and adjust it accordingly. Save time and money. Again, if well, you know, let's say in Sophia's case, she's planning for that automation for some equipment upgrade down the road. If she can plan for that, she can budget for it, she can prepare, maybe she can shop for a good deal on the equipment. But if she doesn't have that built into her plan, she may be stuck with what's available when the time comes. There also may be an urgent need at some point for her. Ask great questions, and again, you know, there's really, you know, I hate to kind of use the old term, but you know, there really is no dumb question. It's really ask them as they come up. Engage people that may have experienced something similar or have some experience in your particular field. Develop stakeholders in the process. And again, you know, think long-term for it. You know, it may be the type of situation where maybe you fund it with equity at one stage, but you think down the road there might be a need for debt. Engage a banker early. That way you can have that relationship and they can kind of see the evolution of your business. Maybe it's the flip side. Maybe you started out with a debt structure, but you know, at some point you might want to bring in a strategic partner. It doesn't always have to be financial. So just think about that. Think about the evolution of who am I going to need down the road as things develop as well. Make logical decisions. So that's really the crucial part of a business plan. Is, you know, a lot of times people react and make decisions out of emotion. The business plan, again, is meant to be that grounding tool to say, how do I take emotion out of this and kind of look at, you know, kind of the data and analytics behind my business and what I need to do. And measure progress on tangible goals. Again, we talked about the SMART goals. You know, that's crucial to make sure that you're on track, because I can tell you if you're not making it on year one, you may run into those issues in year 2 and year 3. So again, constantly revisiting that, make sure you're hitting your threshold, because again, that's going to give you a little bit more insight into what you need. So if you know to hit a certain revenue target, you need to talk to X amount of customers. Well, you know that that month, if you didn't talk to that many customers, there's a good chance you're not going to hit your revenue target. Again, just kind of looking at those things can help give you a little bit more in-depth kind of view of where things stand and what you may need to pivot to in your plan. Focus on the finances. Again, understand what your balance sheet looks like, understand what the risks are in your balance sheet, and then use that to kind of manage your day-to-day operation as well. The risk of not planning, as you could imagine, a lot of it's the converse of the benefits, but you're more likely to have wasted time and money. You're really going to be using kind of the failure to plan is going to generate, more lessons based on experience rather than, proper planning. You do too much and miss opportunities to delegate. So again, recognizing what you're good at and what kind of resources you need. You may, if you don't develop a proper plan, you may end up kind of getting pulled in too many different directions, because rather than focusing on what you know is important, you're focused on kind of putting out all the fires around you as you kind of manage your business. You run the risk of burnout. And again, mentally, it's very draining to maybe see things that are being, posing a challenge to you or trying to navigate through. We see a lot of people, sometimes they get burnout just because it's hard mentally to kind of take the time to sit back and reflect at the same time that you're still trying to run the day-to-day operation as well. Confuse or alienate investors. Again, that could be something that if, let's say Sophia pitched her business idea to some investors, told her it was going to be a cell phone repair business, but next thing you know, all she's focused in on is the appliance repair. An investor might say, hey, what's going on here? I thought this was cell phone repair. That's the business I understood. The appliance repair I thought might have been kind of a later addition. So, again, making sure that everybody's on the same page with your stakeholders. And then fail to do the math and quantify success in practical business terms. So again, what are those successful benchmarks? I've seen plenty of businesses that say, I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for a different incentive or reason. I've seen other people that say, I'm in it for the money, and that's okay too. You just want to quantify what is success mean for you in terms of developing your business. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Hopefully you found that helpful. But if there's anything in particular you wanted to kind of go back on, talk about a little bit more, or if there's anything you want to kind of customize to your business, let us know. I know Mary is on the chat, so feel free to either let us know in the chat or feel free to ask.